Oh, this morning?
10:30 this morning.
Yeah, so you're the first ones really as a group that are having the advantage of getting them. Bob has agreed to sign books for you if you would like tonight. So you can have at it if you want. Good book.
I've already signed 15 books.
Have you? Don't
Yeah.
get writer's cramp and
Not
don't.
yet.
Okay.
It's a $5 charge if he signs.
They only sold it, sorry, how come it's around
I
50?
bet somebody bought them from somewhere else and brought them in. I don't know where they are.
Bob has to pay for the book somehow.
Yeah, I haven't
For
collected
sure.
for 15.
Oh my God. Well, it's really nice that they're in. They are going to be available up at Park Place Books as well as here. Is that what it's called? And so people will be able to order their books that way too. Or
On the
just
website.
Call. You can just call and leave an order and somebody from here will get back to you. Any way that we can, we'll be selling those books. And it's so nice of Bob. A lot of you don't know this, but Bob Lanier was very generous. He's spent a lot of time, long while talking to lots of people and putting this book together. And one of the things that he has done, he's ordered 1,000 books. They got printed. You're seeing the first of them. He is donating the books to the Kirkland Heritage Society, most of them. He kept a few because he had some friends that he had promised them to.
I have grandkids.
Grandkids.
Some family and something. So you were committed.
I was committed.
Yeah, you could have bought them. We'd have them for sale.
I use my sleight of hand. I got some off the top.
Well, Bob's donated books to the Kirkland Heritage Society to market, advertise, however, and sell, and the proceeds will go right straight. There's 100% of the proceeds will go to the Kirkland Heritage Society to help out with our expenses, which are pretty high, naturally. We're a big organization. We do need money naturally, and this is one of the ways that happens for us. And thanks a lot, Bob. It's really over and over. You're probably going to get the next book. Coming out in, I think it's the next mailing in the next couple of weeks or so, we are going to have, I think you may even see it tonight. Bob, are you going to pass these membership surveys, or did you want to talk about it?
We're going to send them.
Okay. Look in the mail for the Kirkland Heritage Society. There's just going to be an envelope will come out. They'll have information in it, but there's going to be this membership survey, which is going to be real important to us and to you. And it's about our monthly programs. We want to have some celebrations that have taken place. Are you going to have that?
No, the next one that's going to be out is, it's on World War II and the shipyards. And we've got some fabulous things to show you.
Maybe that was a celebration of some kind.
Celebrations is after the next one, which is
In the past was very complex. Now you just push a few buttons, or you just push one of your buttons that you already have a telephone number programmed in. Lynette Frecker, she's our new membership chair, has been working pretty diligently lately. Wanted her to say a couple of words so that you know who Lynette is. She's been around the Esoterical Society for a long time. She and Barbara worked really hard on, and Bob worked really hard on the houses and the inventory that we have that was done for the city. We spent a lot of time down in the dungeons over there in Seattle, I think.
And now some of those houses are torn down. It's really a shame. But thank you very much for putting up with my phone calls this last several weeks. And if I haven't talked to you, that means that you're either paid up or your number's enlisted. So, which is, I still have people I haven't spoken to. And so if I haven't talked to you, let me know. I mean, let me know who you are anyway. I know I've talked to some of you and I have no idea who you are sitting here. Which brings me to another question. Would anybody really, would you mind wearing name tags? Permanent name tags? Okay. Because it drives.
Any stories or information you have, but tonight I'm going to just start with our special guests over here, and I'm going to have them tell me their name, and then I'm going to have them tell me when they moved to Kirkland, and then lastly, Why did they choose to come to Kirkland?
Is somebody going to record this or? Excellent.
You will have to speak up, not so much for the camera and to get picked up. That'll pick you up okay, but for everybody to hear. So whoever's talking,
Do you need some light up there?
No, I think we're okay.
And don't be bashful, we want to hear all your stories. We want to hear names. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Yeah, so I think we'll start with Meredith Gaskell, and she can go ahead and tell us what year she came to Kirkland and why she chose Kirkland.
We came to Kirkland in 1954. We had lived in Bellevue on Evergreen Point, and we decided that we were going to raise our family in Kirkland. And we're very glad. And actually, we came and lived on the Gravel Pit Road, which is now some elegant name, Forbes Creek Boulevard or something. But it'll always be the Gravel Pit Road for us. And a lot of people here, everybody else. And actually, we bought a chicken farm on the Gravel Pit Road and had 2,300 layers. The only thing wrong with that was that they had no respect for Christmas or Thanksgiving or 4th of July. They all laid eggs every day of the year. Sometimes let them pile up. But that was the reason we came to Kirkland, because we found the chicken farm that we were involved with one before and thought we'll carry on with Kirkland. And our 5 children all went through the Lake Washington School District, and we now have our 3rd generation of Gaskells going to Lake Washington School. Is that enough?
Sure, that's perfect, and then we can, open it up later for conversations and stories in more details, but that was perfect, Meredith.
Thanks.
Okay. Helen. Yeah.
I came out to Kirkland in '38. At that time, we were very fortunate in being the new owners of waterfront property, which in those days even was very hard to get. We used the place for about 5 years as a summer home. And at that point, it was such a nice area for us to be in. We looked into the school district, the Lake Washington School District, and we were so pleased with Milton Johnson and his recommendation, special classes for our children. That was the main selling point in building our home in 49 and living out currently. My son, both sons are with me, Ray and Fred. Fred heard about this program tonight and he told me, Mother, I would just love to come and say a few words about how I enjoy being raised in Denny Park. So if I could send him over the next few words, telling about Denny Park. Fred?
Sure.
He's got gray hair, he qualifies.
Yeah, I qualify. I felt that I was raised in paradise, next to Denny Park on the water. And at that time, Denny Park was in 2 parts. The north part of the park was a day camp for kids from the city. And the kids would come out either a day, a weekend, or a week. And of course, us kids in the neighborhood would mingle with these kids from the city. And when the kids from the city found out that we lived there, they'd, "Oh my God, you live here? Wow!" And behind Denny Park on the east side of the road was all woods, and Denny Park Creek running through it. And my buddies, this is in the mid '40s. My neighbor kid Donnie Williams and another kid, David Watson, old timer families. We actually forged all those trails in Denny Park from day, all of them. There was no trails when we were there, or when we started. I remember one time, as kids, we wanted a place to have our fish we catch in the lake. So we made a big dam in Denny Park, on the Denny Park stream. We did a real good job of damming the stream. And we had a great big huge backlog of water behind this huge dam. And I'm sitting at the house outside having dinner, and all of a sudden this big crack! And Don Williams and I looked at each other, we knew exactly what it was. The dam broke. And it washed out the bridge, the wooden bridge that was across the road. Of course, my mother never found out about that until I was about 35.
I didn't know whether I should censor this speech tonight either.
But it was paradise to have that park for us kids to play in. We had tree camps. We made corrals for our horses.
Play horses.
Oh yeah.
Well, there was real horses at the north.
Yes, and at the north, or excuse me, the south end of Denny Park, there was a circle corral,
Yeah, right.
and they had ponies,
Yeah.
and you could get pony rides, and what we call the Wicked Witch, which was the caretaker, Park Caraway, it was real scary. Lived in a haunted house.
Oh, yeah, they always did.
And that circle for the ride the ponies is now where the southern parking lot is.
Right.
And we lived on that in that park. Mom and Dad had a great big train bell. And when it was time to come home for lunch or whatever, they'd ring this train bell, and boy, you could hear it, miles away. And we'd scurry on home. In fact, now when I hear a bell ring, my mouth starts salivating because it was calling dinner for lunch.
So do you remember when the tornado hit?
Oh yes, and the big huge tree fell.
Right.
Also behind the day camp, there was this big, huge trapeze run where you're in this sling and there's this cable that would go around the big hook. And you get this cable chair and you let go and you just down the other way. And that was fun to fall off and skin your knee and all that sort of stuff.
Well, if you go online to history, I wrote a history of that, a little history of Denny Park, about a 2,000-word page essay, tracing it from Orion Denny all the way.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, go to historylife.org and just do a search on, we search on Denny.
Oh, Denny?
Do a search on Orion Denny, yeah.
Okay.
And, it's about like a 1,500, 2,000-word essay. It was kind of fun researching.
Oh,
Because I was finding all these neat little stories, and I always thought, oh, that must have been a cool place to live around back in the day.
Yeah.
It's still nice.
And so I was born in 41, and so, at 6 or 7, I was pretty independent. And I was lucky enough to have a lot of neighbor kids that were around my age. So, and we all like to gather at Mom's house simply because Mom always put out the goodies and the cookies and the popcorn and everything. And we had one of the best beaches around. But it was really, I think, a cherished treasure of mine to grow up with that type of atmosphere. In fact, Mom and Dad would say every year, you want to go to camp? And I said, camp? What do I want to go to camp for? I got more boats here than the camp does.
I might mention about this tree in Denny Park. It is listed in the category of State of Washington Forestry Department. It dates back to Columbus, 1492. It was a Douglas fir tree.
The ones fell
It
down.
fell down
Yeah,
about 8 years ago.
it was a freak tornado, it was a water spout actually.
Yeah.
The tornado started over on the other side, like,
By Sand Point.
and it's by San Point, it came over the water. And the one thing I always was amazed in the newspaper descriptions, there was somebody at Denny Park that said they looked up and they could hear the birds screaming inside of it. All the birds got sucked up into it.
Wow.
Screaming as it was spinning around.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that like in the 60s?
It was when I was alive because I
Yeah, it
lived
was
on
in
Binfield,
the
I loved that
Yeah,
area.
it was in the 60s.
And I remember the dead silence right before, and then that
Yeah.
rocket of birds.
Well, I'll tell you, it was the 60s because on the other side of the lake, one place that it picked up a shed in the backyard of young Bill Gates and some family.
Was that at the end of, was that the storm at the end of the World's Fair in October, that Columbus Day?
No,
Columbus Day?
No, this was just a really freak occurrence of, a rare tornado. I mean, you can actually.
It was in the 60s.
It was in the 60s.
Didn't another one go up,
That was 64, that was huge, that was all.
didn't another one go up the canyon by Champagne Point Road?
Yes.
Yes, I remember
Yeah.
that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it uprooted a tree right in Holmes Point Drive.
That one that came across the lake, my place down in Kirkland, the pressure dropped so rapidly, the air pressure, it sucked the hatch in the attic, and sucked the attic hatch right up into the attic.
Wow.
I'm surprised it didn't break any windows.
Yeah.
He sucked that attic hatch up in the,
Yeah, my children, we had Juanita TV up on Juanita Drive, my children, well, actually, we were down at the junction at that time. My children were at home right behind where it is now. And they called up on the phone and said, the chicken coop just flew around the house and all the trees are waving really hard. And I said, oh, sure. And then later on I thought, well, gee whiz, I better go home and check. And as I drive up Juanita Drive, all these trees, big trees are laying on their side in that gully there. And then I got home and sure enough, the chicken coop had flown around in the chicken coop or someplace else.
The Denny Park Road is like a horseshoe, and my grandparents built out there in 29 south of Denny Park, but the road only went to Denny Park. So you had to park your car at Denny Park and you could walk north to the cabins and the houses that were up there. And my grandparents built a great big 9-bedroom brick home out there. And my grandfather had a retail construction machinery business. And one time he brought home a big truck, or a big tractor, and drilled a road. And that's why it wiggles a lot down in Denny Park. But again, I just want to come and just tell you how thrilled I was or am to have a childhood in Denny Park, going in the Lake Washington High School. And I'd like to find, does anybody have a picture of Juanita Grade School, the old one?
I just gave, I did a story on that, and I gave, where is it? No, I gave Bert Robert, I did it for Chuck's paper. There's a full-page story of Juanita Elementary School and the history of it. There's a picture.
The grade school up on.
Yeah, the wooden building that was there.
With the bell on top.
Yeah.
We've got a couple pictures.
It'd be nice if they dedicated a wall to make a mural in the new one with that old.
Yeah, 'cause that's the third one now in that location.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think Helen Nicholson gave the Historical Society a lot of pictures of that area.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Well, the community hall still stands, still standing there.
Yeah. The Improvement Club is the
The
Juanita
Improvement
Improvement Club is the name that's incorporated.
But the wooden grade school was on the corner. Then they built the new grade school in the back, and they cut down the most gorgeous fir forest back there that we as kids used to play amongst these big, huge tree roots and made our camps. And I mean, it takes 6 kids to bring around these trees. Well, I took that all off of the new school in '53. And then that's gone to pot, and they're building this great big monster now. But I'd like to talk to the school up there and see if they dedicate a wall
They have the article that I did in a frame in the library in the school now.
Okay.
Because I gave it to them on their 100th anniversary.
Yeah.
What you did was
Well, one of the reasons Denny Marcus is so perceived is it's Orion Denny, who was one of the first white children born in the county, and then, you know, that property came along, he took it, and they wanted to keep it sort of as close to the original so that future generations could see, you know, what the land was like here. It's like Schmitz Park over in West Seattle. You go to Schmitz Park, it's like going to Jurassic Park. It's all virgin timber.
But didn't Denny Park, Denny deal with the city of Seattle?
Yeah, and see, that's what made it unique. It was a Seattle City Park
Yeah.
that was not in Seattle city limits.
Right.
So Seattle actually had control of that land
Yeah.
for the longest time, and that's why they used it as a day camp for the underprivileged children of Seattle.
When does that become Denny Park?
Well, it was always Denny Park, but then it became a county park.
Yeah.
And when was that?
Listen, I went to Denny Park from Broadway Playground, and we took the ferry. That was the big deal. To get there, and stayed overnight, had a campfire, had races, did all kinds of things. It was a memorable occasion.
Yeah.
Well, we used to throw rocks on the roof of that bunkhouse. And late at night, the kids are going to sleep, we used to throw a rock at
I'd like to add a little extra. We had the Greyhound bus come down Holmes Point Drive.
twice a day.
There was one that left Seattle at 9 o'clock, and then there was one at 2.
It was the one that served Kirkland.
3:30. It would start in Seattle, swing down Denny Park, go into Kirkland, and then back to Seattle. And that is during the years when gas was again cheap. And it was very convenient for me to live out here and take the Greyhound bus into Seattle.
Well, I want to thank everybody here for giving me the opportunity to tell my story of the fabulous childhood I had. That's why I'm so spoiled.
That's right.
Okay, Joanne. I'm Joanne Harris. We're related. My daughter-in-law. We came here in 1949. We were going to the university and living in the most dreadful housing. It was a long house with about 4 different couples in it. And we had coal stove, which we never got the coal going, so we were terribly cold. And if you lived here then, you know we had snow from right after Christmas until April. Continual snow on the ground. And we were so cold, one weekend we decided to bring our 37 Chevy over and visit Lois and Alex Siding. And they had bought a house up in Houghton, which we thought of as the houses that were built for the ship workers during the war. And it was so lovely. It was warm and just wonderful. And there were a lot of empty ones. And they said, you know, if you could get to $500 together, you could buy one of these. There are a lot of empty ones, and they're selling them to GIs like, well, $500 was like $5 million to us. We were going to school on a $124 a month GI bill at the university. So anyway, it was so neat. We so wanted out of where we were. We had nailed cotton blankets over the windows because the snow drifted in with the windows shut. And we had a 2-year-old that ran around with mittens and a hat and a snowsuit all the time. It was just a dreadful place to be. So we borrowed the money from my father and we moved over to Kirkland in April of that year. And everybody was fixing up a house over in Houghton. A lot of vets had moved there after the war. And we had already had one child, and then we had Christine about 3 years later. And then a third was coming, and we had a 2-bedroom house, so it just wasn't going to work out. We already had one on a trundle bed, so we started looking out in the country, thinking it would be so wonderful to live out in the country, and couldn't find anything we could afford. And we found a house where Herb Timmons was living. It's one of Peter Kirk's brick houses. And the Timmons had lived there 25 years. Herb used to have a car place where Jay's is now. And the dad had big ditch digging things here in town. So we were able to sell our house in Houghton for, I think it was $6,000.
You made a lot of money on that.
About this house over here for $6,000, which was pretty much just a pile of brick. I mean, we couldn't get a plumber. We called plumbers and they said, get a bulldozer. The plumbing is on the outside of the house because it was built by an Englishman. And that's the way we built it. And we had frozen pipes a lot. Anyway, we spent a lot of years pasting it together and holding up the walls with wallpaper. And we've lived there for 50 years and raised 4 children. And Christmas time, the Heritage Society is having a cookie exchange, so any of you want to come visit.
She has a beautiful restored, she has a scrapbook that has pictures as they developed and improved the building. It's wonderful.
Well, most people wouldn't have lived the way we did. I mean, we had a lot of the plaster was off the ceiling, so we had taken all the plaster off down to the lap in what was the dining room. And we had a party, and so we sprayed Happy New Year's on the ceiling, and it was there for 3 years. Before we got the ceiling tile. It was sort of, every payday you bought a quart of paint and painted the woodwork in that room. So it's been an exciting time.
Right, say something to that brings back, and we moved up to the same area in 1950, and it was the coldest day they had here in Kirtland, and we had to move in the cold stoves and wood kitchen range, and we come from a nice brand new little house, we sold that and went into there, stayed there, and started building another house. I thought we were going to freeze to death.
Well, this house had, when we moved in, it had a huge pot-bellied stove, taller than I am, in the dining room. And then the kitchen had a wood-burning stove.
And then we got the back.
So it was really up to date.
Well, you were right about it. It snowed every year. Every year, it's a lot of snow.
Well, yeah, but it was continuous 3 months.
Now you hardly get it at all.
Your turn.
John?
I'm kind of a newcomer. I think I'll just say that I came here in 1946 and the 2 newspapers in the town, Kirtland News Advertiser at the time, which I had an agreement over the telephone with Roy Verba that I had a chance to have a partnership in it, which didn't turn out. And then the East Side Journal was sold, and they contacted me, so I joined the partners there with the same understanding. And then I eventually was able to be a publisher of that. One tale that I always in mind, keeps coming to my mind, is Paul Bell was one of the policemen here in town that he always come to do it. And he said one day, you want to go out and search for this railroad camp? This man disappeared up there. And so I went up near the railroad back in the woods, everywhere in Kirkland, and we heard them search that grounds all over. We couldn't find a thing. And later, a month or 2 later, they had some other officials search, and this man had a couple of dogs there, and all of it, they found the bones of the man in the debris around there. So I gave up trying to be a detective.
The archive of the paper should have a lot of Kirkland stuff.
Well, Collins, who's, he knows more about, was in the old paper than I do.
You still in newspaper, I saw your candy stripe, your pinstripe.
Oh, he gets his face in the paper all the time.
Or on stage.
Yeah.
And he's considered Mr. Kirkland.
Mr.
now.
Kirkland.
That was a recent article, right?
I guess after you get over
I
that.
just come to one of our meetings with a straw hat and all.
That wasn't even one. I want to tell you, you were referring to that was in the play, and I didn't have a particular part, just one of mom townspeople. And we had co-ed dressing rooms at the theater, which was in regular time was a tool room, and the staff was always coming in and a screwdriver or a drill, something while we were changing clothes or waiting for our cues. So that's a theater room.
Are you done? Or are you
Fun
done?
times, fun times.
My name's Jerry Rutherford.
I can tell my name.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
no. Charles O. Morgan. Anyway, I worked for him for 18 years, writing one-year reporting and doing news stories and feature stories. But to back up, thank you. To back up, I came to Kirkland in 1946. No, 45, sorry. I was married in 44. My husband and I lived in a little teeny dumpy apartment in Ballard for a year after we were married, and I was working temporarily at Alaska Life Publishing Company, and a gal named Charlotte Turkanen worked there, and she brought down an East Side paper with an advertisement for a place to live out in Juanita, a little half of a duplex from Mabel and Jim Lacey. And so my husband and I came out to look at it. There was a little creek running, it was just north of Juanita Beach, there was a little creek running through it, and we were other half of the duplex. We shared a bathroom with them, that you had to be sure to lock the door when you went in there. And then we had a old coal and wood store that was converted to oil that we cooked on. And my husband loved to, he was a good cook, and we used to keep the top of the grate clean with pumice stone and paraffin. Anybody remember how to do that? Yes. And then he'd cook pancakes on top of that. We eventually, my husband's avocation became his vocation, and we opened up Juanita TV, which we had for many, many years, and down in Juanita Junction, and then out in up on Juanita Drive eventually. We also lived, before moving up on Juanita Drive, we lived up above what we called Mud Lake. Mud Lake Shopping Center didn't sound too good, so, but actually the name of the lake is Lake Whittemire. And we lived up there in the middle of 10 acres, and my kids had a wonderful run of those 10 acres, and we had a big garden, and the kids would walk. Our driveway was half a mile long off of Northeast 132nd, and they would stop. The Mountain View Pickle Company, their name was Fred and Corinne Klein. They used to make dill pickles, and they made them in big barrels, and they were in the pickles. The cubes were put in the brine, and they were sun cured. There were 2x4s out there, and the barrels laid on that. And my kids would get off the bus, and they would go in and stop and see Mrs. Klein, and they'd say, "Could we go to the bathroom?" Sure. Well, then they'd come out and say, then she'd give them a cookie. And then they'd say, "Is Mr. Klein out in the pickle house?" Mm-hmm. So then they would go out and get a pickle, and they pickle on the way down. So we always call that the pickle of the pea stop. And at the other side of the driveway was Chet Brown, and he had bees, and so we always got honey from him. And across the street there were two people, the Winters and the Reposes, who had the Reposes and the Reposes, yeah, they had eggs and the egg ranches, and I would get eggs from them, and also down over the hill from where we were towards where the hospital is now. There was a family named Abe Campbell, and they also had eggs. And where the hospital is now was a big cherry orchard, Victor's Cherry Farm. And also, the Skinner family from Seattle had they raised thoroughbred horses, and they had a track out there up to 132nd and south of there, and they used to run their horses out there. And then in the winter months, when we always used to have lots of snow, we'd block off that road and we'd slide down from the top where the power line goes across all down that hill, and had a great time. But back to that big storm that came across the lake, I remember that as I told you that little anecdote about my kids calling. I think Juanita was a wonderful place to live. I sold my home in 2003 or 4, I guess, and then I moved into a retirement community in Buffalo. And I miss Juanita, particularly I miss my yard because I had half acre of ground. And I think the big fir tree on our property, and it's still there, is probably 125, 130 years old. And as I say, it's still there. But there were no houses up above us when we moved there. It was just all forest. And as I say, I miss that. But life goes on.
Steiner's Corner.
Steiner's Corner. My husband was a volunteer firefighter, and for over 25 years. And George Shane was fire commissioner. And it was all volunteer to begin with, and eventually became, it was King County Fire District 41, which it still is. But then it became the Greater Kirkland Fire Service, and it was all consolidated together. But I remember when they used to have sleepers, when it was strictly all volunteer, they used to have sleepers at the fire stations. And my husband used to always like to be a sleeper because he would go down and give poker lessons to the other folks. He always came home with the money too.
Well, Jerry, don't you remember when the whistle went off? Well, the wives and the kids would go on, and the wives would make coffee, and the kids would help haul furniture out of a burning house. It was great.
Well, when we first moved there was a big siren on the corner down at Juanita Junction and up on Thin Hill. And then later on, after the sirens, they had what they called a plectron, which looked like a little radio. It was red, it was about so long, it was metal, and it was toned off from the station. And then it would broadcast, and when you listen to it, then everybody would run to listen to where the fire was, and then you'd have to go to the fire hall and get the truck. And one of the biggest problems, and I don't know whether I don't think they still have it because everything, when you dial in, you know where you dial from. But to get people to put the northeast after the address or the northeast in front, you would end up on Rose Hill instead of Juanita if you gave them the wrong northeast. But then later on, they got improvement. Of course, everybody wears a little digital pager nowadays.
They still have problems out
Do they still?
Do y'all remember the airstrip that used to be on top of?
Yeah, it was there when I first moved there.
there.
There's an interesting, I brought it along, maybe you all have it, that portion of the hidden past that the Times put out. There's a picture in there. There's a lot of wonderful material.
That was North Seattle?
Yeah.
There are a bunch of little strips around.
No, that's my own copy.
Is that one over in Bellevue?
We got back in Seattle.
The Boeing buildings are now.
Well, I could talk all evening, but I'm going to stop and back up.
Could I add one thing about telephone service? Jared reminded me, Marge Bailey used to be, when they had the party telephones, was on duty, and she was a real pal, because I'd call her up and the bells would ring or the whistle would blow. I'd call Marge up and say, "Where's the fire?" She'd tell me. If she got the word first, she'd call me, I'd dash out to her.
It was a volunteer here in Kirkland for a lot of years. I can remember the two Hutchison brothers locking their store, their hardware store, and running to get them as it went by.
you would hear the other person's ring on your half of the line. But being true nosy people, everybody always lifted up the phone to see what was happening. To everybody else, especially Jerry. No, I don't know, maybe I didn't do that.
That's why I talked to the telephone company, they're doing that, nobody's reading the paper.
Yeah, that's what he got a recommendation from the telephone company.
Here you're talking about Klein's. My wife Betty's closest friend in high school was Alice.
Oh, Alice,
And
yes.
so they used to pick cucumbers for
Yeah.
Fred.
Her last name is Bottom now.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, Joe went to school with her too.
Good.
You're on it.
I can't say anything about older, but I
She's
certainly
Betty Evans.
realize how much has changed. It certainly is wonderful. It must have been wonderful for you at that time, but now it's so much easier. Everything is so
Well,
much
when did you
easier.
first live
We
here?
moved here in 1996 into the condo on my birthday, August 10th. And after we had packed all the dishes in and the furniture, we went, had the birthday dinner, same day at Fish Cafe. So that was our
I
celebration.
thought you said you lived here in the 30s.
No, just all I did was come over here
Oh, to the Denny Park.
Denny Park. So I knew that, that's all.
One of the best things that happened to us when we came here, I had been raised in the Methodist church, and there wasn't one. So I asked my neighbor, who I'd also known in college, Verna Thormelin, where did she go to church? And she went to the Congregational Church, the old New England Congregational Church, that the steps went up and the windows on both sides and choir up in front. And so I thought, I can try it out, but probably won't work. It was wonderful, and that's how we all know each other for many years. We're all from the Congregational Church here in Kirkland. If you don't have one, come join us.
And if you could sing, we really need you.
Yeah,
So I just hear we're celebrating the 125th anniversary.
125th anniversary.
This year.
we were started in Colton.
Didn't you, weren't you there when it started?
No, the bell you hear every,
Retaliate, died.
the bell you hear every Sunday or whatever, it's ringing at noon for the Tent City residents, but it's, that bell is named for Sarah Jane Houghton, who the town of Houghton is named after. She sent the bell to her friends who were starting the church down in Houghton, and she thought they needed a bell. So it came around the horn to San Francisco and then came up from San Francisco, and that bell is still on our church.
It's ringing at noon every day because we have the Tent City in our parking lot now, or the city's parking lot, really. And our pastor, Walter John, has a memorial each day for one or two of the street people who have died in the last year or two from whatever cause, and tells a little bit about them. And it's been a very impressive thing. Some of us go and join, and we're getting acquainted with some of the people there.
I know your pastor did a marvelous job. I attended a city meeting that was on the subject of pros and cons of the tent city. And I was really impressed by all the theologians who stood firmly in defense of the tent city in the face of all the people from farther away who were making allegations that we had catch tuberculosis and their babies were killed.
We have dinner with them sometimes when our church is feeding them, and it's been very interesting to find that many of them are college educated. I've talked to a number of them that had computer jobs and had jobs, and they've simply lost their jobs, couldn't make their house payments, lost their houses, and there are several married couples there, and it's been a lesson for us. Your turn.
My turn?
I'm Gerhard Dykeman, and we moved here, Phyllis and my wife and I moved here with our daughter Nancy in 1950 to accept a job teaching at the Lake Washington School, and it was at that time it was called the Kirkland Intermediate School. It was the old junior high school, the one that they tore down, and they left a thing that looks like the building's burned down, and all that's left is the entrance, which I think is not too good. But anyway, I had several visits with Kirkland prior to moving here. I had a sailboat when I was working for Boeing before I went to college. And I would sail in Lake Washington and sail around the ferry as it went from Madison Park to Kirkland. And the ferry boat would, of course, blow its whistle to make sure that I wasn't going to turn in their path. But we would come over and stop at Halverson's drugstore and get hamburgers and Cokes, and then go back out and sail the rest of the day. The next time I visited Kirkland was a friend of mine that we grew up together, and he got married in a Kirkland Congregational Church, and I was an usher for him. And during the time between rehearsal and the wedding, we had an opportunity to visit the town. And I thought, gee, this is a pretty nice place. Okay, I went to the service and then through college, Central Washington College. And at that time, the superintendents from the different districts came to the college and interviewed you. And so you had your pick of where you wanted to go. And I interviewed with Seattle and Highline and Kirkland. And I had a little bit of a in because my brother was working for the State Department, and I got an introduction to Morton Johnson. And I did, and that's why I settled here in the Lake Washington School District. And then after a couple of years in the intermediate building, then we moved to the junior high building and taught there in the whole district.
And where was the junior high then?
It was the one that burned down. Yeah, the intermediate building was the one that they tore down, and the junior high, which was originally a high school, and it was a high school for a larger district than just Lake Washington. Kirkland, I think Bellevue people came and other people came to it. And because I remember over the stage where it has an emblem, I can't remember what it was, something Union High School, I think. Union. Yeah. But we first lived in what was known at that time as the Howard Apartments, and they're about a block away from the church. Right now, when you go by it, it's unpainted building, apartment building. We were first down in the basement. It was very low ceiling. When Phyllis had to do washing, she had to go outside and go to the other part of the basement to do the washing. After a year, I think we were able to move upstairs, and then we moved to Houghton, and we were right on the border. Lakeview Terrace was our backyard, the fence for Lakeview Terrace. We were on 64th, and that was our first home. Had 2 more children there. Decided we had to move. One of the things that I wanted to say about Houghton is that we still had Kirkland mail delivery. Our mail was delivered, but Houghton at that time had a post office, but everybody had to go to the post office to get their mail. But ours came through Kirkland and was delivered because we were just one street over from Lakeview Terrace. Another little incident, we had a fire, an old vacuum cleaner that was a hand-me-down from my folks, and in order to use it, we had to lean it against something, and my wife used the hose to clean it. Well, somehow a spark got into the bag and it started a fire. And so right away she called the Kirkland Fire Department. And so they came, and by that time she'd already dragged the vacuum cleaner outside in the yard, but the fire department, oh, and she pulled off the Davenport, it was a studio couch, she pulled that out. So we're really all over with by the time the fire department came. But the thing is, Houghton had a volunteer fire department, and that night here they came with their fire truck, all their regalia and so on, and they said, why didn't you call us? But one thing they did do, they had some kind of an atomizer that went through the house and it just got rid of all the smoke damage, because when Phyllis pulled that top part of the studio couch out, the smoke, it still smoldered, and it came right in the bedroom window. I was privileged to be asked to be on the Houghton Park Department, and it was that time that we had the Houghton Beach Park. And John Dance wanted to put in his drive-in theater where the South Kirkland Park ride place is now. And in order to, and part of it was in Bellevue and part of it was in Houghton. And in part, in wanting to get some compensation, why he would develop a playground park where the screen was. And so that was going to be an additional to our park system. And it didn't come about. But, and then about in '69, when finally the two towns decided, okay, we're merging. Houghton had always pulled back and would not merge with Kirkland because Houghton felt that Kirkland wanted the financial backing that Houghton could supply, and they didn't want to do that. But finally, it worked out, and it voted. And of course, at a certain date, why both towns ceased, and then a new town of Kirkland came out from that. Yes. And then Bill Woods was the mayor, and he asked if because of the increase in population, he asked if I would like to be a member of the park board. And I said, you bet. And it was during that time, from '69 to '79, that I had the privilege of being on the park board. And it was during that time that we developed Marina Park, extension of Houghton Beach Park, and also Marsh Park. That was the golden years, I called it the golden years, and the year that we honored Dave Brink. Al Locke said it really was the greening years of Kirkland, because it was, the money was there from the federal government, and we were right in there, and we were able to get the money to develop the parks, and so it was really a glorious time, and like I say, I'm very privileged to have been a member and worked at that time. The climate in Kirkland, the council and the people were all for it. When it was asked for money, why it came through. And my friend here, why he was one of the members of the park board too.
Could I inject a little bit about why Houghton became the downtown Chamber of Commerce of Kirkland? Wanted to have the surplus ships from World War II in the bay, and it was going to be a money maker and so on. And the people, Houghton area didn't like the idea, and that made a bit of a tension like this. And then Kirkland got the idea that it started annexing, so they had some ideas for annexing, and they took a strip around Rosen Hill, around the top, and we're going to include Houghton in this. And one morning, we all woke up and Houghton had incorporated its own self in the war when the battle was on.
They did. It was almost like a spike, they kind of snuck in with the corporation.
Oh, I would think that I was kind of, I would consider myself as a Kirklander, even though I worked in, that I was in Oakland. But I did, when I was on the park board in Hopewell, I would keep talking to Dick Schuler. And I'd say, what are you gonna do with that watershed up there, you know, because it was about that time that Kirkland ceased getting their water from there, and they got it from the Seattle water, run a pipeline in there. And he said, oh, that's gonna be always a park, but finally, during the time when I was on the park board, it was designated definitely the Kirkland watershed.
Well, Kirkland and Hogan are unique in their park system that just travel around the entire lake, and it's all private property, you know, little parks here and there.
Yeah.
Kirkland on the other end is the flip side almost. You got tons of public property. And it's, you know, I mean, where else can you get views like this, you know, of the lake, or anywhere else around it?
This is a kick-ass piece of property right here.
Thank you,
Yeah.
John.
Yeah, and you know, and like Bellevue has a really good park system, but it's more greenbelt parks, you know, they're missing the waterfront. And last year when I was researching Bellevue, I asked about that, they said that, what was it, Tom, just said the opportunity came up in the 50s or 60s for the city to buy all the property around Bellevue, and they didn't have enough votes. And a couple of these guys today are still regretting, you know, and I forget the amount of money it was like for a song, you know, I mean, it was the amount of money they would have spent, it was nothing, but they thought, oh, I don't know, this might not be a good idea, and there were a couple of people that didn't do it. And so now you can go down to Main Bar Bay, and it's just, it's all buildings, you know, with little tiny little park now.
Well,
So they missed that opportunity.
the first for sale of the shipyard was $100,000.
Yeah.
The whole ship,
Yeah.
the kit and caboodle.
When I was in the Houghton Park Board, we tried to contact the people, the family that owned the Houghton shipyards to see if they would, you know, incorporate the park, and they said, no, we've got our plans for it and so on. At that time, they bring out these plans, say, well, here's what we plan to do. And there were some great big high-rise buildings that they had pictures of. But we couldn't make it.
Do you remember the plan where they were gonna, somebody wanted to cap Yarrow Bay? They were gonna basically put like, you know, something on top of the bay with high rises out in the middle of it. I came across in the newspaper, it looked like something out of the Jetsons, you know, it was these huge, you know, Space Needle type things, and this gigantic complex right in Yarrow Bay.
Right, yeah.
Thank goodness that didn't go anywhere.
We forgot to mention your most well-behaved student attended this meeting today.
I wasn't going to say anything, but you know, the Jesus Christ Superstar, there's that one song about hair.
Yeah.
Well, we had a variety show in those days, and I was the director of it, and he put on that performance and sang that song with air.
He directed all the plays and things that the students did here.
Oh, I wanted to see something, I brought it here. When, one night after one of our meetings, there was a combined meeting with the council, and it was during the time that we had developed Marina Park. And always there was kind of a join back and forth, you know, but now we've got a port where we need a commissioner or a captain of the port. And so after one of these combined council and park board meetings, after it was adjourned, then Bob Neer, who was the mayor at that time, he says there's some unfinished business we have to do, and we have to make an appointment of captain of the port for the Kirkland. And so consequently, they brought out the captain of the port.
All right.
What does it say up there?
It says, Gerhard Dyckman, captain of the port, Marina Park, appointed 12/15/91. My first answer then was,
repair. Can I tell a quick story about Fred? My husband used to repair all the young men's car radios. And Fred, of course, knew Ron. And one night, it was dark, after dark, we had this big banging knock on the door. And here's Fred. You gotta help me, Ron, you gotta help. What happened? I hit a deer on the road in my dad's car, and he's gonna kill me.
No, it was my brand new car.
It was your brand new. Anyway, so Ron said, well, come in and you want to call your dad? No, he didn't want to call his dad. He just wanted somebody to sympathize with him, I think. And so we Ron and he drug the deer off the side of the road, and then I guess we called the sheriff or somebody. Anyway, they said, and they came and took it away, but his dad was really angry at him because he thought they should have had the deer to have deer meat. He was upset because he didn't get the deer. I wiped out my brand new car. It's like 3 weeks old. And I know. Go ahead. Oh, excuse me, Artie, go ahead.
Well, talking about when you come to Kirkland.
Who are you?
My name is, my name is Artie Berkey. I didn't have to move too far to come to Kirkland because I was born here in 1922. My folks came here in 1919, and 3 years later, I came along. Listening about the schools, I attended the old Central Elementary School up here where the City Hall is now. I attended the real junior high school down here, which was built in 1932. Not this transitional, whatever you call it. And I went down there when the school was 2 years old. And junior highs in those days, that was a pretty new thing. And we were pretty excited. Those were 3 real good years. And then we went over to the real high school up there, the Unit A High School. The Kirkland High School, not Lake Washington or whatever. Kirkland High School. Another 3 years there, which was very good. Well, anyhow, then of course, after I graduated, went away. In 1954, my wife and I, Ellie, were living over in 148th, about a mile north of where Sears is now. And then, well, what are we going to do? And I started traveling for Boeing at the time, so we thought about that. And I said, well, let's look around the east side. So we ended up back in Kirkland here. We've been there ever since, so it's very boring. One thing I might mention, talk about storms. In 1934, we had a storm here. We had a windstorm. This was a mother. It was over 100 miles an hour. And it just really raised Cain. But the strangest thing, they had a great big oil storage tank, which was moored down below Kennydale. The cotton picking thing broke loose. And it was like right out somehow a high sci-fi movie. It rolled all the way up the lake because the prevailing wind was coming that way. It rolled all the way up the lake, clear up to Kenmore. And I guess the reports were coming out, and they were, there were reports that come out on the radio. And the people were panicking that this thing was going to hit the shore somewhere and wipe out some houses or whatever like that. And where we lived, we had a tremendously large acreage. And in back, we had cedar trees, I mean humongous cedar trees, like 3 and 4 feet in diameter. 12 of them came down. 12 of them, just the mess. So my dad being dad, he said, well, there's good and bad. We made more cotton picking fence posts and shakes than as you can imagine. And right in the middle of the Depression, what can you do? No one has any money, but we sure had a lot of bartering stock. And talking about the volunteer fire departments, my dad was a real staunch believer in the volunteer. He was on that for a long time. And in 1929, they finally got their new fire truck. They went out and they got the Pratt's fire truck. And he was so excited. So he come home and he said, guess what? We got our new fire truck. And that's the one that you see up there holding up there in the fire hall. And that was a biggie. And in those days, they used to serve a lot of different areas, and one of them was the points down here. Medina and those points, and they got a call in the middle of the night, and they got a call. Big fire down there, so they went rushing down there to do their thing. Nothing. So they come home, and the people in authority down there, well, we just wanted to really see what your reaction was and whether you're reliable or not. I guess you know that just about started World War IV right there. I never saw my dad any madder than he was when they found out what had happened. But I do have a little nostalgia here. I have his uniform cap, fireman's cap, 1929. Kirkland Fire Department. That's it. Oh no, it don't fit me. In the archives and in the Founding Fathers book and other places, there's a picture of them in front of the Gateway Theater with a little France truck and all the guys. You see that? Well, that was his cap. I just thought I'd bring along to it.
All right.
Would you put it on, please, just for a picture? We're gonna bully you.
First, I'll tell you my dad. Very good. Oh, he was proud. He would stand there. He was one of the toughest one of the guys. He was always in the middle. Oh, I gotta tell you about Joe Scabella. Joe Scabella was our resident shoemaker. And Joe was about 4'9" nothing. I mean, he was a little bitty short guy. And for some reason or other, he and my dad were the best of friends. They just really got on. And fight, those two guys would fight. And particularly with the fire department, because Joe was so small, he couldn't haul hose. He couldn't do anything really heavy, so they put him on all of the dials and instruments. And that's what he did. He handled the gauges and the valves and all that. He did a very fine job of it. But the fire chief's name was Ed Blau, and he was kind of a bit of a martinet, but he's a good guy. And he and my dad would sneak up behind Joe, would be over there working on it. And they start talking to each other. Hey Floyd, what do you think about that? Is he doing that right? I don't know. And then Joe turned around and looked at him, you know, and they're very serious. And he turned around and I don't think he ever did really wise up all this time. And then finally he would get so mad and he would turn around and he would just be hopping. And according to Dad, he would say, look, you two, go do something. He said, I know what I'm doing here. I know what I'm doing here. And later on, they developed your little bromides or little sayings that you have. And one of my dad's favorite saying was, son, he said, remember one thing, you never get a shoemaker to work on your car. But, like I say, we came back here, and fortunately, all three of our kids had a chance to go through Lake Washington School, and as adults, it was a wonderful thing for Ellie and I. You know, you try to raise your kids, you kind of wonder what's happening. And they told us that one of the finest things that they did was we stayed here, and they all went through the same school. And they really liked Lake Washington, and did very well. And for that, we were real proud. So, yeah, real fond memories of Kirkland, and we're still here.
Tell about you digging
Oh, Jim Brennan and Larry Johnson, I thought most of them had about 4 too many or something, but they come to me one time and said, hey, Dum-Dum, we're going to build a swimming pool. And I said, well, good for you, glad to hear it, you know. Well, no, this isn't conversation, we want you to help us. So anyhow, they finally convinced me that we should do that. And of course, no money, I mean, whatever. Volunteer-wise, we started out, and Larry Johnson was the consummate guilt master. He would go out there and take them on like the cement companies. He'd go to the cement outfits, the 3 biggies right here, and he would say, we need 1,500 yards of concrete from you. Well, what? He said, it's for the kids. It's for the kids. Oh, well, what's Joe Blue? Oh, he's doing better than that. Hey, knock it out. Anything he can do, I can do better. Well, that's kind of the way it went, and it was long and laborious, and we had a good engineer. The thing about it was, and the technology then as compared to now is vastly different. It was 2 full years, and then of course the service clubs did their thing with the bathhouse and so on. And various stages of that, like putting the gunite in the pool, putting the concrete in the pool itself. And the weather was so terrible. I mean, it was really bad. Just about the time that you're getting ready to do something very important, the monsoons would hit. It would rain like mad, or get real frosty or whatever. And anyway, a couple of years later, it was done, and it was dark, and we were finishing off something down there, and we looked at each other, and all 3 of us stripped down to our skivvies and dove in the pool. And it was cold in there. It wasn't very warm. And anyhow, we said, well, one thing about it, maybe we built the pool, but we were the first ones to swim in it. I'll never forget.
Where was it?
It's a pool right down here in Dublin. Right that side of the library.
There was a big discussion, somebody will remember, should that pool be covered? And that never happened. They talked pretty seriously about having a pressurized cocoon.
Number of times.
Well, anyway, so we ended up having one outside pool around the area, and then strangely enough, ironically, Murphy's Law, about, 2 years later when forward thrust come in, and they hit their pool.
We got nothing. Because we had one.
And we already had one, but it was really, it was quite an adventure. We used to, we had a lot of people come there. Strangely enough, the metering system for the chlorination is very tricky. This is bad news. I mean, and we were talking one day, so what are we going to do about all the copper and the plumbing and everything, and the chlorination and all that? What are we going to do about it? Well, we don't know. Here come this guy walking up there, and I well remember he was in his 80s. And he had his buddy with him, a little short fellow, and they come up and they were watching this. And he come over and started talking to us, and he said, who's going to do your plumbing on the brass and copper work? Nobody. He said, well, I'll do it. This is a big job. 6-inch pipe for some of that copper pipe. And you've got to be kidding. No, I said, the only thing is, I don't want anybody bugging me. I don't want anybody watching us. I said, we'll only do it on Saturday. Whatever. What can we do for you? You buy a beer, you take you home, or whatever. But those guys came down there. Oh, it must have taken them 2 months. They got all done and they fired it up. Human nature is a very strange thing because all the work they put in on that, as intricate as that was, and when they were all done, he had one little leak. and he and his partner were standing over there, and their faces were that long. What? We had a leak? There's 92,000 wells here, what can you say? Well, that really devastates me. That shouldn't have happened to him. And we just laughed at him. It was so funny because he was a little bit embarrassed at the end.
Were they Kirkland residents? Were they Kirkland residents?
No, they weren't.
Who was that?
I can't remember. I honestly don't remember their name, but we had a number of volunteers who would come in just at the right time. The people, you wouldn't think about it, but you take an Olympic-sized pool where you've got to put the tile line, the contrasting tile line down there, and putting that in, you've got a lot of tile to lay. And Keith Ross, who was in the Little League with us, I don't know if you remember Keith or not, but he come up to, well, I'll do it. He said, well, Keith, he said, well, I got 2 guys that I'll twist their arm and they'll help me. They come down there and work weekend after weekend putting all that tile in. And of course, we had to plaster the inside of the tile, of the pool to get that white finish to it. And when they got all done, it was so beautiful. And you watch some technicians like this. Tile setting is an art. I mean, to be able to do that properly is real art. And they did such a beautiful job. And then the cement work, here come the trucks, free gratis. All they had to do is furnish the labor. And then Larry Johnson lined up the labor, and they got all these people coming in and spreading this stuff. Yard after yard after yard of concrete. And then the day that it officially opened, and the day that you saw all the kids in the pool, and the mother standing over there being happy, which is very important, very important. And when you saw that, then it gave you a good feeling. It really gave you a good feeling.
That's great.
This is one of the reasons some of our park board meetings lasted so long. There were all these stories that came out, when he and Jim Brenda were growing up in the town, and it's just too interesting. You can't cut them off.
I've often said, and in fact, we were just remarking the other day to one of my kids, I said, I don't see how any of us in our generation survived till we're 18 without getting killed. Some of the goofy things you did when you were a kid, and I still believe that today, some of that. And then going on in life, and then the other thing I was thinking about was, when our kids were growing up, like our boy, our son, who was a real problem from the standpoint that he wanted to walk real early, he had bruises on top of bruises and so on. Today we would have got 20 years for child. I